Welcome back, Wise Women Forward listeners. Today, we have with us a friend of ours from a long time ago, from when we did our first movie together. Her name is Tia Newcomer, and she has spent her career at the moments when growth, innovation, and discipline all have come together at once, most often in service of women's health. As CEO and board director, she has led organizations through inflection points, guided companies towards successful exits, and built the teams and culture that lets a mission actually scale. For Tia, the results were never the point. They were proof that culture and performance are inseparable. And she's a proud Husker. She recharges outdoors with her husband, two daughters, and their loyal white lab close behind. Hi, Tia. Thank you so
Hi,
much for being with us today. So,
thank you.
as I said, we originally met when we were doing 40 weeks, and you were at the helm of all of the marketing at CBR, which is Cord Blood Registry, which is basically like an insurance towards your children's possible bad diseases. It's a horrible thing, but it's this
Exactly.
great thing, right? To
Let's
be
make
able
a
to
bad
have.
day better.
Yeah, exactly. And then lately, something that you just recently left was Caring Bridge, which is an amazing support system for caretakers of their older parents, or it could be, their children, their siblings. What makes you take a job? What makes you go into a company?
Yeah, oh my gosh, both of those kind of the leap I took into that world of women's health with CVR and then this latest role. I will tell you that there was a moment that led me to those, and it was deeply one personal. It created that kind of internal spark that you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm actually using the unique skill sets that I have to make the world better. And you can feel it. The best way I can describe it is just a feeling I get when I read a job description or when I read something. And I will share with you the inflection point that happened when I took that job at CBR, leaving behind, again, great career at Hewlett Packard and consumer packaged goods companies like Frito-Lay and PepsiCo, all cool in their own right. But being married to a now retired firefighter paramedic, he was a lieutenant at the time. I remember he came home from a particularly hard day. He averaged 10 to 14 calls, mostly medical, in his career, and he'd come home from one of those, sleepless nights shift. And I said, "Well, are you good? Everything good?" And he's like, "I'm fine." He goes, "Tia, if they didn't pay me, I'd still show up." And that was a moment where I went, I have never felt like that. What does that even mean? And I would love to feel like that. So that moment caused me to go introspectively and say, again, what's the unique thing that I bring, and how do I help people and leave a legacy that looks different than maybe what I thought I was doing at the time?
Yeah,
That's
I think that's
amazing.
so
Yeah.
beautiful. And it makes so much sense as my experience of you, even way back, when 2014, when we were doing our
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, what I'm curious about is you've now been on the front lines of business, and the interaction of like male and female and the sort of the inherent idea of caretaking. How have you seen business change over this last decade and a half?
I think a great milestone happened, even though it was difficult at the time, which is COVID. And COVID opened up the rooms of all of our homes and and all of us trapped inside those homes. And so the reality of who you manage from CEO all the way down to the front line was front and center. And you could not hide it. You could not separate your work life from your personal life. And so I think that reality, what I loved about it is the transparency and the honesty of what was going on. Again, whether you were a CEO or whether you were a frontline worker. And so that moment started changing and shifting the conversation. It opened doors for honestly, new companies to be born, or companies that were trying to wave the flag of, hey, caregiving is a real thing. It's impacting indirectly or not indirectly, it's impacting women more than it is men, and I think the ratio is somewhere between 70-30. So most caregiving is done by women, 70%, which takes them out of the workforce, or it unfairly or overburdens them from a work perspective. So a lot of those women that are doing the caretaking of their mothers or their fathers in their elderly ages, or are also doing it with their young kids. And the statistic that I found just shocking, that was very front and center during COVID, was that on top of a 40-hour work week, they are also carrying 40 hours of unpaid caregiving at home. And that was the breaking point where we saw two things. We saw one, I think is amazing, more flexibility in the workplace. We also saw companies starting to support some of those caregiving concierge or services, so reimbursement for that through employee assistance programs. And then I think the last thing is that there's been a little bit more talking out loud about what am I bringing into the room when I'm at work, so that people are unfairly judged or held back for that. So I think that's the biggest change I saw. Now, here we are, 6 years removed from that global pandemic. And unfortunately, I do see some things walking back, and we're seeing, as we see the jobs report, the most recent one, there is still a lot of women exiting the workforce and a lot of people scratching their heads as to why. So I think on one hand, there's been tremendous progress, and on the other, we tend to fall back into what is kind of the norm. So Chris, I hope that kind of gives a perspective of what I've seen.
Well, it does for sure. And it's also like I'm most curious, even it feels like good ideas are getting more important as things get more constrained, which women in terms of caretaking, you'll have a lot of good ideas. Um, but is there even further that you would go into about how you would dialogue with, like, let's say the male people you worked with, right? Has that shifted at all? Have we, come to terms with the fact that we need to embrace women's leadership more, in your view, or is it the same as it was 15 years ago?
I think yes and no. So I do think, I've been blessed with working with amazing men across my career and in partnership, like the partnership we had. So I feel, and I often ask myself, is that because I vet that or I attract that, or is it because, I'm not sure, like, is that the norm? Because I talk to other women and they're like, not the norm at all. And they get a lot of, um, I think, what's the word I want to use? They are held back because of maybe they're pretty transparent about what they're dealing with at home, or they can't stay late for the meeting, or they don't want to stay late because they have these other priorities. So I think that there are definitely men and there are a lot that I work with that are very aware, and honestly, they also want some of that, I'm going to call it flexibility or acknowledgement of the things that they're carrying at home. And I think if I look at the top ranks in any company I talk to or with or have been a part of, it is still male dominated.
Yeah.
So I think there's a acknowledgement that the balance creates much better outcomes, like all those studies we've seen, better outcomes financially, better outcomes for teams. Decision making is more measured when you have both, male and females at the top, and yet the top board and or CEO positions are still, I think the number now, it just declined from like 32% at its high to like 26%, I think, right now, over a year time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And you talked about women leaving the workforce. And I just wrote an article for Ms. Magazine about the economic cost of not looking at menopause correctly and not really supporting women in the truth of menopause. And we talk about that in our movie, that it's a transition that we are meant to go through when we are birthing our wisdom and leadership selves. And if you're not supporting that, women are like, I left corporate life for that exact reason, the ageism. And it is a huge economic cost. So I'll just make it super personal. What would you do differently in any position that you are?
Yeah, given the idea that they're receptive to really accommodating menopause.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to give two examples because I think there's two moments unfairly that women go through at peak times in their career. One is birth or childbearing ages,
Yep.
and then one is menopause, right? So those two moments, and I'll give two personal examples and where I lead teams and what I love to create space for that I think has helped tremendously in the companies I've been at. So the walk the talk, the example I was given was I was 6 months pregnant. I was at Hewlett Packard and it was our first baby. And my leadership team promoted me into a director level role 2 months before I was going on maternity leave. Very smart by them. Made me second, because first child, sometimes you're like, well, maybe I will stay home. That's a key moment when women exit, right? Depending on how much they make. There's so many things in that. And so smart on them because they wanted to retain talent. Two, it made me go, wow, I've got a career here. So I've taken that as an example in those childbearing ages and done similarly. Like if you have a high talent, having that conversation very transparently and early and elevating those women, even though you're going to lose them for, however long they choose, right? 3 months, a year, or however long they choose. So let me apply that to menopause because I think it's fascinating. This is that second moment when we are now entering in, we have, we're 50, let's call it 40 to 50, right? In the prime years of where we have great experience, great knowledge. And that's where you start seeing that gap of women to men. And suddenly, I've certainly have experienced, you're not as sharp, your mind has that, the fog, the brain fog, whatever experience is, right? Or you're up presenting. I talked to a CEO the other day, and I go, how did you handle this in front of your board? She's like, oh, I just called it out. She goes, I'm standing there presenting and I have a giant hot flash. I'm red. I'm sweating suddenly. They think I'm having a heart attack. And I just stopped and I said, I need to take a moment. I'm actually having a hot flash. I'm perfectly fine. And this is at a board meeting, right? So I loved that example because she called it out, named it, took a break, came back, and her board was like, oh, okay, a board of all men had to acknowledge that, okay, this is happening, right? I think the other thing is the symptoms, right? I certainly and have friends like I get debilitating headaches. How can and it doesn't, I don't know when it's gonna hit. It's hit on board meeting days. I have no idea how I've sat through and led a board meeting, how I've responded to questions. It affects how my brain is thinking, right? So I think, what I acknowledge, and I love that example that my CEO friend gave me, is like, just call it out. Like, hey, I'm entering this room. Here's what's going on. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm just saying this may not be my best self on this exact moment day, but I'm still here. My husband and I laugh because I think he told me he's had a headache once in his life. And I'm like, I don't think these are like debilitating.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know.
Right.
I get migraines, so I'm with you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had the other day, I had something that felt like it may start to be a headache and then it went
Well,
away.
please let me not hit you
Right.
in the head so that I can try to show you.
No, I apologize. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but Chris, you're right. I mean, my husband, he's just like, he's empathetic, yet he's like, I think one time he had stitches in his head, right? So Grant, yeah, he had a headache and he's like, I don't know how you do it. And I was like,
Yeah,
that doesn't even hurt. I'd rather have stitches in my head. So
So you two are like going, oh, stitches, that's it.
yeah, exactly.
And
exactly.
that's so incomprehensible to us as men. And I just again when my that's why I put my daughter Gaia, our daughter Gaia, right? We're married and we have a daughter,
Right.
right? Our daughter Gaia
Yeah,
into the
she
movie.
grew in here.
Yeah, okay.
Just to let you know.
I participated in that.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Yes, yes,
okay, another podcast, right? So,
exactly.
so I put her in the movie because I actually want to remind. So, for any males watching, I want to like show them what hell one cycle is, and for women who may be very comfortable with that because that's what I've seen women become is very comfortable with that. You have so much grace about you to remind you what hell that is. And then even when we were filming the scene, I had a male person, my friend from high school, actually, this guy Rob, who I love. He was helping me film it. And when we were done,
Filming the
yeah,
OBGYN.
exactly.
Yeah.
So he said, I have no idea. I had no idea this was happening, right? The fact that you could be open to a board of men and that they're like going, okay, we don't comprehend this, but we have to embrace it. And that's such a beautiful thing that I heard. Do you have more examples of men like stepping up that way? I mean, that's curious to me.
Yeah, I think I'll speak from my own team as well. And part of this, I have to also acknowledge and honor the fact that I was the CEO. So, I mean, like if I say, hey guys, I have a really bad headache today, like what are people going to say?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of power dynamic there that I will
Yeah.
acknowledge. However, the team, the men that are on my team, they're so when I am open and transparent about that, then that allows them to say, oh, my wife has gone through this, and this. Oh, my daughters have this, and this. And I think it's just about getting the conversation on the table so that it's open. And while you may not be able to physically relate to the symptoms, you have people, usually loved ones in your life, that have the same thing. So we can get that conversation on the table and it's more common than not, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's the importance. I love I think it's a TikTok trend where you see men putting on the electrodes onto their
Yeah,
abdomen.
yeah, the cramp belt.
Yes,
Oh
the
boy.
Yeah.
cramp belt. Yes, because I'm like,
And they can't make it past number 2 and it goes up to 10, which
Yeah.
yeah,
is what
yeah, on a
most
normal,
women go through
No, no,
at some point
I'm
in their
fully,
lives.
fully like if males had one cycle, we would cut everything out and that would be
right,
the end of humanity. So
right, right.
there would just be, we'd be like, I gotta go have a beer with my buddies. And that's it. We're done. So thank you guys. That's what I said to my daughter when she told me about the savage headache she has or what she's going through. I just thank her. And I thank all women. Thank you so much for going through what you go through so that we can have kids and then going through what you go through so that we can have your leadership. I'm so grateful. And I hope that I keep trying to contribute to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Chris, what you bring up is I want to honor the difference between men and women, and it's a good thing, right? It's like my husband could cut off a finger and be walking around, and I'd be like, why is it bloody all over here? He's like, oh, where if I cut my finger off, I would know immediately and I'd be screaming and probably fainting, right? So there's some inherent just guttural differences from our biology, right?
Yeah.
Well, that is honorable. The thing that I think you're naming is like talking about it transparently in boardrooms, in leadership rooms. Women that have such horrible cramps and miss, what fill in the blank, 3 days a week or a month of work, like that should not be held against them. And I think often what leaders come to the table is, well, they're missing work. Therefore, they're not a good employee or they're not performing well. When someone is not doing well in their job, and it's not because they missed 3 days because of cramps, right? So you have to distinguish the two. You can't just name they're missing work and therefore they're not a bad employee. It's like, are they doing well all the other 27 days of the month or 28 days of the month, right? So I think the transparency and the conversation is what's really matters and why I love what you guys have done from 40 weeks to this Wiser Women production. That's what matters is the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I've talked to a lot of women um, is they're leaving their corporate life, not because of the symptomatic issues, but because it's untied their tongue.
Mhm.
And they haven't had the luck of working with great people, that they were able to communicate with. And they basically leave before they say something they feel like they'll regret. Or they say it all and then
Yeah.
walk out the door
All right.
because,
All right.
and that's basically why I left. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. And have you seen that in your life or have you heard about it? And do you think that if women stayed and started using their voice, things would change faster.
I love this example because yes, and I unequivocally and unapologetically still show up that way. And you can either fire me or I will choose to leave. Like I think there's both. There's an and in there, right? And so I think my message to women is like, say it and stay. And what's the worst outcome? If you're going to leave anyway, great. If you're going to get fired, I think, but, and then there's a third option, right? Which people, here's the example I'll give. And it happened as recent as my last CEO job where I had a phenomenal board chair, many board chairs actually along the way, but one specifically who happened to be a man, and some of the feedback I was getting was, Tia, sometimes you seem defensive. I'm like, well, what does that look like? He's like, well, when we're on Zoom or when a meeting, you lean in. And I said, I got to stop you because men around that is how, like, if I'm doing that, one, I'm not realizing it. Two, this is a very male thing to do. That's what I grew up around. So why is this bad for me, but okay for, right? And so, like, again, I just keep coming back to naming it. Stop someone, have the conversation. I didn't get mad, I didn't get defensive in that moment, but I sought to understand and really made him think about the feedback he was giving me and would it be similar if I happened to be a man? And so I do think that this I love that you said like you can't contain yourself, can't contain some of but it is because of the wisdom, it is because of the experience expressed differently in a female voice. And that's where we come back to needing both, right? You need both in the room, both equally powerful and different in the way that it is expressed. And I think that's the thing that we need to get used to is the expression of a woman's voice in those moments. So another example is crying. Or, I was taught very young in my career, like you just don't cry. Now, I can't tell you, am I wired that way or did I learn it? Because I often don't, like when I get upset, I get more angry than I do like tears out of anger or tears out of frustration. And so that's interesting, right? Because why was that wired or coached out of me? I don't know. I can't tell you, but why is it a bad thing if I showed up crying? That's an equal emotion to anger, expressed differently, right? And so again, I think you're really making me actually think about the way people show up that in the business world is judged very differently and often negatively. And if you actually just pause and get underneath the emotion and ask the questions, there's some really good information that leaders and teams need to listen to underneath.
That is such sound advice for people listening. So underneath the emotion, there is a question that can lead to wisdom. It's just like that is a whole series of books or a course or
Yeah.
whatever I
And
bring that into
the statement, name it.
name it. Yeah, it's just amazing. So we call this podcast Wise Women Forward. And when we say that idea to you, Wise Women Forward, and that notion of that momentum that can build, what kind of things come to mind for you when you consider having wise women go forward?
Yeah, it's fun. I just had a conversation with another CEO founder friend on my back porch here like 3 days ago, and she is this amazing entrepreneurial woman. And what we were talking about is from, let's call it 21 years old to, I call it preferment now. I don't call it retirement because I think in preferment you get to do a lot of fun things and still give back. So that's another conversation too. But across that continuum, when I think of wiser women forward, I think about women not only paying forward all of the things that they've learned over their time here, but I also think about this open conversation about things like finances, menopause, perimenopause, choosing to have children or not, the struggles that exist within those choices, because that's a whole other conversation for women that don't have children. There's also judgment and assumptions made. And so there's so much wisdom that women gain through the journey that actually makes you, at least I've found, less judgmental as you look back or look at younger generations. That I think if we can share early and often. And the financial one, let me unpack that one because that one just kind of hit me. I went to a women's business leaders and healthcare conference, and they had a whole session on financials. And I'm in the session going, this is so obvious. How are people? And it was one of the most highly rated best sessions. And it made me go, oh, I had the fortune of talking to people about how do you invest early on in my career. I had mentors that, right when I started, they're like, put this much money away, etc. My parents talked to me about it. Women don't talk about finances a lot.
Mhm.
Men tend to talk about finances a lot from an early career stage. And that's what hit me in that room. And again, when you think about wiser women forward, what if we could empower our daughters, our people that we mentor, young women, and say, if you put $20 a week away, you'll be set for life at the age of 40, or you'll be a millionaire at the age of 40. Like, how powerful is that? No, I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah.
like a very tangible thing that we can share. And there's so much else around, perimenopause that I'm excited that I and we are living in this time where it's being talked about. And when I look back 10 years ago when I started perimenopause, which I didn't even know, the things that I would ask now, and it's only been 10 years. And if I had women that were saying, oh, Tia, yeah, that's a symptom. You need to go, and this, why are you dealing with this? You need to go in and talk until you get answers or solutions.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the power. When I think of wiser women forward, it's empowering the younger generations with the experience and wisdom that we have hard earned and maybe not talked about, and start talking about it.
Yeah, that
Right
that
on.
that also echoes a lot of what we hear, which is they think the greater community. They think
Yeah.
wiser women think outside of themselves. They think about the future. And it's more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Tia. And is there a question that we should have asked that we didn't ask?
That's to put you on the spot one.
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, oh, let me think about that one.
Yeah. It can be spicy.
Right, right. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think
Cool.
so. Yeah, not the one that came to the top of my mind.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Wonderful.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, then, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We're going to put Tia's LinkedIn because, if there's anything that you want to connect with her on, either to have her on your board or to get some mentorship, please reach out. And thank you so much, Tia, for being with us.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.